It was early morning in New York City, the kind of quiet that feels too still to be peaceful. I walked into the kitchen expecting to find my husband reading the paper, but instead, he was sitting at the table with my bank statements spread neatly in front of him. His eyes moved slowly across the pages, calm and focused, like a man studying something that didn't belong to him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My heart started to pound. I had seen this look before. Not of curiosity, but of calculation. And right then, I knew it was time. I walked into the kitchen expecting the quiet routine of any ordinary morning, but the scene waiting for me stopped me right where I stood. My husband was sitting at the table, not with his coffee mug or the newspaper like he usually did, but with my bank statements, pages and pages of them, spread out in front of him like evidence in a courtroom. He didn't notice me at first. His eyes were fixed on the numbers, scanning them slowly, methodically, the way a man studies something he intends to use. The stillness in the room felt unnatural, almost staged, as if he had planned for me to walk in at that exact moment. My heart began to beat faster, a sharp pulse rising in my neck. The room felt colder, even though the morning sun was shining through the window. I took a small step forward, and that was when he finally looked up. His face didn't show surprise, not even a flicker. Instead, he looked at me with a calm, calculated stare that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the look of a husband caught doing something innocent or accidental. It was the look of a man who had already made up his mind about something I wasn't yet aware of. He had my name circled in red ink on one of the statements, followed by several large numbers that I didn't recognize. Transfers I had never made, withdrawals at times when I was home, payments to places I had never been. As I moved closer, I realized each page had markings, notes, little scratches in the margins, as if he had been studying them for quite some time. This wasn't a sudden curiosity. This was preparation. This was intent. My stomach tightened as I tried to make sense of what I was looking at. For years, those accounts had been mine alone. Savings from jobs, inheritances from my parents, money I had quietly and carefully built for emergencies or for old age. My husband had his own accounts, his own income, his own investments. There was no reason he needed to dig through mine, no reason except deceit. The silence in the room grew loud, pressing against my ears. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a passing bus outside. The soft, deliberate sound of him turning another page. I wanted to ask him outright what he was doing, but something inside me warned me to hold my tongue. Instinct told me this moment wasn't an accident, it was a reveal, just not the one he thought it was. Instead, I stood still and watched him, and the longer I stared, the more the truth began to form in my mind. His posture was too relaxed, his breathing too steady, his expression too comfortable. He wasn't worried, he wasn't guilty, he wasn't even trying to hide anything. He acted like he had every right to be there, like my money was his to inspect, his to judge, his to control. A wave of dread washed over me as memories rushed back, moments I had brushed off as harmless. Times when I'd caught him looking at my mail, the way he had insisted on helping with the bills, even though I never asked him to. The night he came home late and tried to distract me with stories about a friend while slipping a folder into his office drawer. The strange tension whenever I talked about updating my will or adjusting my accounts. I hadn't wanted to see the pattern. I had told myself it was age, stress, forgetfulness, anything but betrayal. But now, standing there watching him go through my financial life with a cold, calculated interest, I understood the truth. This wasn't sudden. It had been building slowly, quietly, behind the mask of a husband I thought I knew. He still didn't speak. He didn't ask me to sit. He didn't explain himself. He just kept flipping through the papers with that eerie calm, the calm of someone who believed he already held the advantage. My hands felt numb as I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself. My vision blurred slightly. Not from tears, but from the weight of what I was sensing. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And this, him sitting with my bank statements, was the moment everything inside me changed. Fear mixed with rage, shock mixed with clarity, confusion mixed with a rising sense of resolve. In that single frozen moment, I knew without speaking a word, my marriage had crossed a line, and whatever he was planning, I had to be ready. When he finally looked up at me, the expression on his face told me more than any words ever could. For a second, he seemed surprised that I had walked in, as if he thought I would still be asleep or out of the house. But that surprise vanished almost instantly, replaced by a slow, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. That smile alone sent a shiver through me. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they think they have the upper hand, the kind that carries confidence built on lies. It wasn't warm, it wasn't loving, it was cold, and that coldness made something inside me finally snap. I didn't say anything at first. I simply stood there, watching him try to pretend nothing was wrong. He closed the bank statement slowly, almost gently, as if the way he handled those papers could hide the truth of what he had been doing. He cleared his throat, leaned back, and said something simple like, "Oh, good morning." But even the tone of those few words felt forced, like he had prepared them in case I walked in early. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. For a moment, I wondered if I should say everything I knew right then and there. But something made me pause. I realized silence could be my greatest advantage. As he placed the statements in a neat pile, I watched his hands carefully. They weren't shaking, not even a little. That, more than anything else, told me the truth. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't a harmless moment of him looking through bills. No, he had been planning this. He had been going through my money, my hard work, my savings, with a calmness that came from practice. He had done this before, many times, and now he was confident enough to do it openly. That realization stung deeply. I decided to sit down across from him, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to look him in the eyes. I needed to see if there was even a hint of guilt or remorse. But when our eyes met, what I saw wasn't shame. It was something far worse: calculation. He looked at me the same way someone studies a puzzle, trying to figure out how to get around it. I felt my stomach twist. This man, the one I had trusted for decades, was treating me like an obstacle. He tried to talk casually, asking me how I slept, mentioning that he was just checking a few things, making it sound like he was doing something helpful. But I could hear the tension underneath his words, the way he kept choosing his phrases carefully. He avoided certain details, avoided mentioning the numbers he had been studying. It was all too deliberate. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. He wasn't surprised I caught him. He was irritated that I had walked in before he finished whatever he was doing. I stared at him while he spoke, letting his words spill out without interrupting, and as I listened, a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment I could ignore. This was a betrayal that he had been building piece by piece, hidden behind casual smiles and late-night calls, and now that I was seeing it clearly, I realized how blind I had been. My trust had been his shield. My silence had been his permission. My love had been his mask. Still, I kept my expression neutral. I didn't let him see how much it hurt. I didn't let him see how furious I was becoming. Instead, I nodded slowly, pretending I believed his excuses, pretending I was confused, pretending I didn't know the truth, because I knew if I reacted too quickly, he would shift, hide, lie even more. No, I needed time. I needed information. I needed proof stronger than his charm and stronger than the lies he had rehearsed. So I let him talk. I let him pretend. I let him think he had control. And as he sat there, giving me that fake, gentle smile again, something inside me hardened. I realized that the man in front of me, the man I once trusted completely, had crossed a line he could never return from. And instead of crying or yelling or questioning, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would find out exactly what he had done. I would gather every piece of truth. And when the time came, I would confront him in a way he never expected. Not with fear, not with tears, but with power. Because at that moment, I finally understood something. He thought he had control. He thought I was weak. He thought he could sit in my kitchen, study my money, and still look me in the eye with confidence. But he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He woke up a woman who was done being fooled. For most of my life, I believed marriage meant sharing everything: trust, money, decisions, and the weight of each problem life threw at us. When I married my husband, we built a home from nothing. We struggled in the early years, saving every penny, taking extra shifts, fixing things ourselves instead of paying someone else. Back then, every choice we made felt like teamwork, like something sacred. I used to say, "Whatever is mine is yours." And I meant it with all my heart. I never imagined the day would come when those same words would be used against me. As the years passed, I became the one who managed our finances because I was better at numbers and planning. I paid the bills, handled the savings, kept track of our accounts, and made sure we never fell behind. My husband trusted me with all of it, or so I believed. We opened a joint account and built a small savings fund that would one day help us retire peacefully. At the time, I thought he was grateful, but slowly his attitude began to change in ways so small that I ignored them. He started getting irritated when I reminded him to save or told him we needed to be careful with spending. He would roll his eyes or sigh loudly, as if I was nagging him. Once, I found a receipt for something expensive, a watch I never saw him wear. When I asked, he brushed it off and said it was old. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I didn't want to think that my trusted partner had started lying. I pushed aside the discomfort, telling myself I was overthinking things. As the years went by, more odd moments showed up. He started closing his phone quickly when I walked into the room. He kept his wallet tucked away in strange places, like under the mattress or behind the bookshelf. When I asked why, he said he was just being careful. It didn't make sense, but I convinced myself he was just being protective. After all, we were getting older. I thought maybe he was becoming more cautious, or maybe he felt insecure about growing older and losing control. Looking back, I see now that all those small moments were signs, warnings that something inside him had shifted. But at the time, I still saw him as the man I married, the one who promised to walk beside me through everything I kept telling myself. We've been together too long for him to betray me. I never realized betrayal grows in silence, in small lies, in little secrets that collect like dust in a forgotten corner. The first big red flag came when I noticed a handful of strange withdrawals. They were small, $50 here, $100 there, but they weren't things I recognized. When I asked him, he shrugged and said he used the money for small errands. I wanted to believe him, so I let it go. My heart didn't want the fight, and my mind didn't want the truth. I thought arguments weren't worth it. I thought peace in the home mattered more. That was my mistake. Over time, the changes became bigger. He began spending more time outside the house, often leaving without telling me where he was going. He avoided my questions, changed subjects quickly, even joked his way out of conversations. It was subtle manipulation, the kind you don't see clearly until much later. I trusted him because I wanted our marriage to stay whole. I ignored my gut because I didn't want to believe the man who shared my bed could be planning something behind my back. One afternoon, I overheard him talking quietly on the phone. His tone was sharp, secretive, nothing like the man I had known. When I asked who he was talking to, he snapped, saying it was none of my business. That was the first time in decades he had spoken to me like a stranger. My chest felt tight, my stomach knotted, but again, I swallowed the pain and let it slide, telling myself he was just stressed. Looking back now, I understand that stress doesn't make someone hide financial statements. Stress doesn't make someone whisper on the phone. Stress doesn't change a man's eyes, turn them cold, shift them away from you as if you're a nuisance. What I saw wasn't stress. It was guilt growing quietly behind his silence. And still, I stayed quiet. I kept paying bills. I kept managing our accounts. I kept trusting him, even as the truth sat right beside me every day. disguised as little changes I didn't want to name. Now I see that trust isn't broken all at once. It breaks little by little until one morning you walk into your kitchen and find your husband sitting with your bank statements, and suddenly everything makes sense. For most of my life, I believed marriage was built on trust. I believed that when two people shared a home, shared bills, and shared memories, there was no need to question anything. For decades, that belief guided me. I never checked the accounts because I assumed we were working for the same future. I never asked questions because I thought questions meant doubt, and doubt felt like disrespect. I wanted peace in the home. I wanted stability. I wanted to grow old without conflict. So I trusted him with everything, thinking he valued our life as much as I did. But in the years leading up to that morning, I had begun noticing things that pulled at my mind. These were not loud warnings, not dramatic fights, not clear betrayals, just tiny moments that made me pause a new credit card bill with a store I had never visited, a small withdrawal here and there that he brushed off as for errands, a sudden change in the password to an account we both used. Simple things, so small that I convinced myself I was imagining problems where none existed. I did not want to be the wife who accused her husband without reason. I did not want to create tension. So, every time doubt entered my heart, I silenced it. I told myself he wouldn't do anything to hurt us. But the truth was that our marriage had slowly shifted, so gradually I didn't see the slope we were sliding down. He became quieter when bills arrived. He started leaving the room when the phone rang. He began taking walks alone. Long walks, even late in the evening. Sometimes he returned with a guilty look he tried to hide. Other times, he came home irritated, snapping at small things. I blamed stress, age, and life. I never thought to blame deceit. I see now that this was the beginning of the betrayal, not the moment he touched the bank statements in the kitchen, but the years where he quietly prepared for this day. Our financial life had once been a partnership. We had made decisions together, discussed plans, compared options. But then he began to take control subtly. "I'll handle it," he would say. "No need for you to worry." And because I didn't want conflict, I believed him. I stepped back. I let him take over. And that was my mistake. I gave him full access to accounts, full trust over investments, full control over decisions. All while thinking it was just him being responsible. I did not realize he was building a world inside the marriage that I was no longer part of. There were early signs I should have questioned. Once, I saw a document on his desk with my name on it, something legal, something financial. But when I asked, he said it was nothing important. He folded it so fast that I felt a sting in my chest. But again, I chose peace over confrontation. Another time, a large withdrawal appeared on the bank statement I asked casually, and he said it was for the house repairs. But no repairs were done. No contractor came. No tools were bought. The excuse faded into silence, and I let it pass. That should have been the moment I looked deeper. But I didn't. I trusted the man I had slept beside for more than half my life. Then there were his sudden interests, researching new accounts, reading articles about asset transfers, asking strange questions about what belongs to who. When I asked why he was reading those things, he said he was just learning. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to keep the picture of us together, stable and united. But those were not innocent questions. He had been preparing for something big, something secret, something that required hiding from me. Now, sitting here replaying everything, I realize the truth. Betrayal does not begin with one big act. It begins with small cracks, small lies, small shifts in behavior. It begins when trust is taken for granted. It begins when one person believes the other will never fight back. My trust, the trust I gave so freely, became his weapon. It gave him access, freedom, and confidence to do whatever he pleased, knowing I would not question him. He thought I was blind. He thought I was weak. He thought age had made me easy to deceive. But age does not remove wisdom. It sharpens it. Age does not soften awareness. It strengthens it. Age does not make a woman foolish. It makes her patient, and that patience allowed every detail to settle clearly in my mind. So when I saw him sitting in the kitchen with my bank statements, I did not feel confused. I felt clarity. I finally understood the years of small changes, small lies, and small betrayals. Everything had led to that moment, the moment I realized the man I trusted had slowly been dismantling the life we built, right under my nose. And in that moment, standing silently in the doorway, I felt something powerful, not fear, not weakness, determination. The time for patience was over. The time for action had finally come. In the weeks after I first caught him sitting with my bank statements, I began noticing small things I had missed for years. At first, these details felt like nothing. Small habits, little changes, almost too tiny to worry about. But when betrayal enters a house, even the smallest sound becomes loud. Even the smallest action becomes a warning. And that is exactly what happened to me. I started paying attention to his routines. He would wait until he thought I was asleep, then walk quietly down the hallway. I could hear the soft click of the study door closing, the faint hum of his phone screen lighting up. For years, I had believed he was just restless. But now, every movement he made sent a wave of tension through me. I realized that he had been doing this for a long time, slipping away into the night to look at papers, numbers, figures, and accounts I had never known existed. Then the mail started coming in differently. Letters that used to be addressed to us together slowly shifted into things addressed only to him. Bills he had never paid attention to before now went missing. Once, I found an envelope torn open and hidden behind the couch. It was from the bank. He thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. When I asked about it, he laughed gently and said it was just junk mail. But inside, my heart tightened. Every lie, even a small one, felt like a thread unraveling from our entire marriage. Next came the calls. He used to talk freely, never hiding anything. But suddenly, when the phone rang, he stepped outside or into another room. He lowered his voice. He kept the doors halfway shut, as if he wanted me to hear just enough to calm suspicion, but not enough to understand what was happening. I noticed how quickly he would end the call when I walked in. He would smile, pretend nothing was wrong, and ask me if I wanted tea. That smile, too soft, too polite, felt like a mask he was wearing to cover something bigger. Then there were the papers. One afternoon, I found a folded document in his coat pocket, a transfer receipt with a large amount missing from one of our shared accounts. I felt my hands shake. We had always made decisions together. But here he was, moving money in silence, thinking I would never find out. I asked him about the missing amount that evening, and he brushed it off, saying he had needed to fix something. No details, no explanation. Just another vague answer given with that same cold, practiced calm. Slowly, the sense of unease grew. I began noticing him watching me more carefully than before, as if I were the one hiding something. When I cooked, he lingered near the doorway. When I read the newspaper, he looked over my shoulder. When I walked into the room, he shifted his phone quickly, his thumb moving faster than before. It was like living beside a stranger wearing my husband's face. Even my own documents began disappearing. Small papers I kept inside my drawer, insurance papers, savings certificates, old receipts, would be moved or turned around. Once, my birth certificate vanished for 2 days. When I finally found it, it was under a stack of his files in the study. He claimed he had no idea how it got there, but deep down, I knew the truth. Every day, the tension spread through the house like a quiet ache. The air felt heavier, the nights felt longer, the silence between us grew thicker. I caught myself watching him, just as he watched me. I analyzed his tone, his footsteps, the way he held his cup, the way he responded when I mentioned anything related to money trust was breaking, piece by piece. One night, I walked past the study and heard him whispering on the phone, saying words that made my stomach turn. "She'll never know. Not yet. I need more time." I froze outside the door, cold fear sliding down my spine. Those words echoed in my ears long after I returned to bed. Everything that should have been normal, a late-night walk, a phone call, a stack of papers, now felt like clues. Clues pointing to a betrayal that had been building quietly right under my nose. And the worst part was knowing that I had ignored these signs for too long. My trust had blinded me. My love had softened my judgment. But now, finally, every small warning was clear. It was only the beginning, the slow erosion of trust, the small cracks that would later reveal the full truth of what he had been planning. And as I pieced together these signs, I knew the moment was coming when I would no longer be able to stay silent. Because the biggest betrayal always begins with the smallest details. In the days that followed, I became more alert than I had ever been in my life. Every movement he made, every sound from his study, every drawer that closed a little too quickly made my heart tighten. I knew something was unfolding behind my back, something quiet but calculated. I had spent years trusting this man, but now I watched him with new eyes. I noticed patterns I had ignored before. He always waited until I stepped out to the garden, or until I went to take a shower, or until I began cooking in the kitchen before sneaking off to check something on his phone, or slip into the study. His shoulders would stiffen whenever he thought he heard me come near, and his breathing would slow as if he were afraid of being caught. These small details added a layer of tension to every hour of my day. One afternoon, while I dusted the living room shelves, I saw him walk past carrying a folder I had never seen before. It was thick, filled with papers that looked worn from being handled often. He moved quickly, almost too quickly, disappearing into the study and locking the door behind him. That door had never been locked once in all the years we shared the house. Something about the click of that lock struck me harder than anything else I had noticed so far. It was not just a lock, it was a clear message that a part of his world no longer included me. Even at night, the tension didn't leave. He would wait until he thought I was asleep, then slowly slide out of the bed. The mattress would shift gently, enough for me to feel the loss of warmth. I kept my breathing slow and steady, pretending deep sleep, but my ears were sharp. I listened to his footsteps move down the hall, heard the study door open, then close again. Sometimes he stayed there for an hour, sometimes longer, and every time he returned, he would slip back into bed quietly, like a thief returning to his hiding place after doing something forbidden. My instincts told me something was very wrong, so I started watching closely. I checked the bank app on my phone every morning. My balance changed little by little, small withdrawals, never large enough to raise alarms, but frequent enough to form a pattern. He thought he was being clever by taking small amounts, but those numbers added up quickly, and I knew they were not accidental. I knew my spending habits well enough to recognize when something was off. The money was being moved slowly, strategically, almost like someone preparing for a life I wasn't supposed to be part of. I checked the mail one early morning before he woke up. Mixed in with the usual letters was a bank envelope with his name on it. I opened it as quietly as possible. Inside, I found confirmation of transactions I never approved, transfers to an account that wasn't familiar. The statement listed a name I did not recognize. My stomach knotted as I realized the truth. He had been moving money to someone else, someone outside our home, someone who wasn't me. I held the paper for a long moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand, feeling the shift in my life settle into place like a cold truth I could no longer ignore. Later that afternoon, he received a phone call. I stood in the hallway as he paced the kitchen with a low but urgent tone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could sense the tension. Every time I stepped closer, he lowered his voice. When I walked into the room, he quickly ended the call and tucked the phone into his pocket. His face changed, shifting into a calm look that I knew was forced. He acted as if nothing was wrong, but the way he avoided my eyes told me everything. He wasn't just hiding money, he was hiding intentions. Even the papers around the house carried pieces of the truth. I found receipts tucked between books, slips of paper from stores, and places he hadn't told me he visited. There were small notes scribbled in handwriting I recognized, phone numbers, dates, reminders that made no sense to me. Each clue placed another stone in my chest. I spent nights awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long he had been planning this and how far he had already gone. The life I thought was steady and familiar was slowly revealing its cracks, and behind those cracks was a man I no longer recognized. By the end of the week, the full shape of the situation was becoming clear. I wasn't dealing with a small oversight or a harmless mistake. This was deliberate. Every step he took was intentional. Every late-night whisper, every locked drawer, every missing dollar. The betrayal was unfolding in real time, and I had no choice but to face it. I felt fear, yes, but also a growing resolve. I would not allow him to dismantle my life without facing consequences. Every clue he left behind became part of the truth I was gathering, and I knew I was getting close to uncovering the entire picture. When the clues finally aligned, the truth revealed itself in a way I never expected. It didn't come in one dramatic instant, but through small, undeniable pieces that stacked together until they formed a picture I could no longer ignore. I sat at the kitchen table that evening with all the documents I had gathered, my hands steady, even though my heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every strange purchase told a part of the story. And when I laid them out in order, the truth was no longer hidden behind his soft tone or forced smiles. It was there in plain sight, staring at me, and it made my entire body feel cold. He had been taking money from our accounts for months, slowly and carefully, so that each piece looked like a normal expense. A withdrawal here, a transfer there, a bill paid twice at first. Each item looked innocent. But when I added them up, it was obvious. This wasn't forgetfulness or confusion. This was a planned, calculated effort to remove money without my noticing. He had studied my habits, the hours I slept, the days I was out running errands, the times of month I checked our accounts. He knew when I would be distracted and when I would overlook small changes. He had used familiarity as a weapon. The truth hurt in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't the money alone that broke me, though the amount missing was more than enough to destroy years of security. It was the intention behind it. This was a man I had shared a life with, a man whose breakfast I had prepared every morning, whose clothes I had washed, whose health I had cared for. He knew my weaknesses. He knew my routines, and he had taken advantage of them with ease. Every detail of the plan showed that he believed I would never discover what he had done. He had counted on my trust. He had relied on my love to keep me blind. Seeing it laid out so clearly made me sick to my stomach. I sat there for a long time, staring at the numbers, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. The betrayal was heavy. It wasn't sudden or accidental. It was steady, deliberate, months in the making. And if I hadn't woken up early that morning and found him sitting with my papers, he might have continued until everything I had worked for was gone. That thought cut deeper than anything else. He wasn't just taking money. He was stripping away my independence, leaving me vulnerable, and removing the security I had built over a lifetime. As I continued reviewing the documents, I uncovered something even more painful, an account I had never seen before, one created recently under his name. Only transfers from my savings had been feeding it without my knowledge. That account held more money than I realized had been taken. He had been preparing for a future without me, setting up financial independence that would leave me with nothing. It was clear he hadn't just betrayed me financially. He had been emotionally distancing himself for months, creating excuses to stay out longer, avoiding eye contact, refusing to discuss future plans. Now I understood why. He had already made his plans without me. The deeper truth was harder to accept. He no longer saw me as his partner. He had begun seeing me as an obstacle, something to work around, something to use, something to drain. I thought back to all the evenings when he sat across from me at the dinner table, quiet and calm, pretending nothing was wrong. Now I saw those moments differently. They were rehearsals, performances, careful attempts to keep me in the dark. Each subtle smile, each distant look, each half-hearted conversation had been part of a strategy. I felt as if the man I knew had slipped through my fingers long before that morning. He had become someone else entirely, someone selfish, someone cold, someone willing to take advantage of my trust without hesitation. And the hardest part was accepting that he hadn't been compelled into this. He hadn't been pressured or influenced. He had chosen it. He had decided I was no longer important enough to protect, to respect, or to stay honest with. That realization was the heaviest discovery of all. By the time I had assembled the final pieces, I understood everything clearly. The lies, the withdrawals, the hidden account, the strange behavior at night. All of it pointed to a single, undeniable truth. He had betrayed me not in the heat of a moment, but through a long series of deliberate decisions. He had risked our entire life together for reasons I still could not fully understand. But now I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The man sitting in my kitchen that morning was not the man I had married, and whatever plan he had in mind, it would end the moment I decided to take control. When I finished collecting every piece of evidence, I knew I could not handle this alone anymore. My hands were shaking and my chest felt tight, but my mind was clear. This moment demanded action, not fear. For years, I had avoided thinking badly of my husband. I had told myself he was stressed, tired, or distracted, but the numbers on my bank statements didn't lie, and neither did the late-night calls, the secret meetings, or the unusual withdrawals. I stood in my bedroom staring at the documents spread across my bed like a map of betrayal. That was the moment I picked up my phone and made the call I had been avoiding for months. I dialed my lawyer, a woman named Margaret, who had helped me many years ago when my mother passed. She had always told me, "Call me when something feels wrong." I heard her calm voice on the line, and I felt my heart slow down just a little. I explained everything slowly, step by step, trying not to cry. She listened without interrupting, only making small sounds to show she understood. When I finished, the room felt silent, almost too quiet. Then she said, "You did the right thing calling me. Do not confront him alone again. I am coming over." Those words felt like the first real safety I'd felt in weeks. While waiting for her, I called my oldest friend, Linda. She had known me since we were both girls. She always had a steady voice. Even when life fell apart, I told her what happened, and she gasped loudly, then went quiet. "I always had a feeling something was off," she whispered. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. She told me she would come too, not to fight, but to sit beside me so I wouldn't feel alone. It felt good, comforting, knowing I had people who genuinely cared. Within an hour, both women were at my house. We sat in my dining room, the table covered with papers, highlighted statements, copies of withdrawals, and photographs of documents I had found hidden in his office. Margaret put on her glasses and studied each page carefully. Her eyebrows tightened the more she read. Linda sat beside me, gently rubbing my hand, grounding me every time fear tried to rise in my throat. Margaret finally looked up and said, "He has been shifting money into private accounts. Some of these transactions are structured to avoid attention. This is intentional. He is preparing for something, and it is not good for you." Her words cut deep, but they were honest. I nodded slowly, trying to swallow the pain. I had loved this man for decades. I had built a home with him. To learn he was quietly draining my savings felt like losing the ground beneath my feet. We made a plan, a serious one. Margaret began listing each step in a calm, steady voice. First, we would freeze certain accounts. Then we would secure legal protections. Next, she would gather more information through official channels. She explained how to monitor any new activity, how to protect my personal banking, and how to change passwords without alerting him. As she spoke, I realized how vulnerable I had been, and how strong I felt now with the right support behind me. Linda fetched us tea, though none of us really drank it. We were too focused on the papers and the truth they exposed. We spread out everything we had collected, organizing them into folders. Margaret advised me to keep a copy of everything in a safe place away from the house. She even helped me prepare a list of phone numbers I might need in case things escalated quickly. Once the legal plan was set, Linda looked at me with soft but firm eyes and said, "You're not weak. You're waking up. That's different. Her voice cracked just a bit. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust myself not to cry. But deep inside, something in me shifted. I was not just a frightened wife anymore. I was a woman preparing to protect herself and everything she had built. Before they left, Margaret gave me one last piece of advice. Do not let him see fear. Act normal for now, but inside, stay ready. I nodded, absorbing every word. When the door closed behind them, I sat back down at the table. The documents no longer looked like chaos. They looked like a path, a painful one, yes, but a path toward truth and justice. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, it's time. Time to protect myself. Time to stop pretending. Time to stand up. And for the first time in weeks, I felt strong. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, long before he even stirred in the bedroom. I sat at the dining table with every document I had gathered, the bank statements, the printouts of the transfers, the notes from the financial advisor, and the summary prepared by my lawyer. I lined them up neatly, one by one, so there was no way he could pretend to misunderstand or brush anything aside. My hands were steady, surprisingly steady, because the fear and confusion from the last few months no longer controlled me. I had clarity, now I had proof, and for the first time in a long time, I had power. When he finally walked into the room, rubbing his eyes, stretching as if it were any ordinary morning, he froze mid-step. He looked at the papers spread across the table, then at me. For the first time, I saw something break in his expression. Not guilt, not sadness, but fear. Real fear. The kind that flashes across the face of someone who realizes the game they've been playing is over. He tried to smile, to ease into his chair like nothing was wrong, but I raised my hand and stopped him from speaking. My voice was calm, controlled, almost cold as I said, "Sit down." He obeyed, slowly, like a man walking toward a cliff edge. I pushed the first stack of bank statements toward him. "Do you recognize these transactions?" I asked. He glanced at them, then opened his mouth to lie. I could see the familiar hesitation, the way his eyes flickered to the side like they always did when he was preparing a story. But this time, I didn't let him speak. I pushed the next set of documents forward, screenshots of the transfers, the anonymous accounts traced by the financial advisor, the highlighted withdrawals that matched nights he had told me he was working late. His face paled. He tried to swallow, but couldn't. Still, he stayed silent. Then I placed the final document in front of him, the summary from the lawyer explaining the legal implications of what he had done: misappropriation, fraud, concealment of marital assets. The consequences were written clearly, in plain language even he couldn't deny. "I know everything," I said quietly. "Every transfer, every lie, every late-night withdrawal, every attempt to move my money behind my back." He stared at the papers, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly. For once in his life, he had no script, no defense, no quick lie ready to soften the truth. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not a husband, not a partner, but a man exposed. He tried to speak again. "I can explain." I cut him off with a shake of my head. "No, not today. Today is about truth, not excuses." The silence that followed felt heavy and stretched across the room like a thick fog. He sat back in his chair, defeated. I saw his jaw clench, his fingers tapping nervously against the table, his mind scrambling for an escape route. But there was none, not anymore. I took a deep breath and leaned forward. "Here are your options," I said, my voice steady and firm. "Option 1, you admit everything, all of it. You return control of the accounts, sign the legal documents my lawyer has prepared, and make right what you tried to take from me." He blinked rapidly, avoiding eye contact. "Or," I continued, "Option 2, I file this with the authorities immediately. Every document, every transfer, every message, every piece of proof, and you deal with the legal consequences." He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine, and I saw panic fully take over. "You wouldn't do that," he whispered. I would, I said softly. And I will, if you force me. The room felt unbearably quiet in that moment, filled only with the faint ticking of the kitchen clock and the sound of his shallow breathing. He looked at the papers again, then at me, then back at the papers. His face crumpled slightly, not out of remorse, but out of defeat. He realized he had been outsmarted, cornered, and caught. The lies he had been feeding me for months no longer held weight. His control was gone. You can't just take everything, he muttered weakly. I'm not taking everything, I replied. I'm taking back what's mine, what I earned, what you tried to steal. He finally dropped his head into his hands, the facade shattering completely. I waited, giving him the space to realize the full weight of his actions. Minutes passed before he spoke again, voice barely audible. Okay, I'll sign. There it was. The moment the power shifted forever. The man who once thought he could manipulate me, deceive me, and drain my life savings now sat crushed by the truth. A truth I refused to ignore any longer. And in that moment, I understood something deeper. Sometimes the quietest confrontations are the most powerful. Not the shouting, not the crying, but the calm, steady voice of someone who finally knows their worth. And I wasn't afraid anymore. After everything settled, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, the same place where I had once seen him holding my bank statements in the early morning light. The room felt different now, not lighter, not heavier, just honest. For the first time in years, nothing was hidden. No quiet phone calls, no secret withdrawals, no false smiles pretending everything was fine. It was just me, my thoughts, and the truth I had fought hard to uncover. I realized then that sometimes the truth is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it arrives slowly, in small pieces, like crumbs leading you back to yourself. The house was quiet in a way that felt real, not tense. Before, silence in this house had been a warning, a sign of something lurking just beneath the surface. Now, silence felt like a fresh chance to breathe. I could walk from room to room without feeling watched, without second-guessing every sound or movement. It was like removing a heavy coat I had worn for so long I forgot it was weighing me down. I felt lighter, even if the path that led me here had been painful. I spent days organizing my documents, securing every account, changing passwords, meeting with my lawyer, and updating my financial plans. Each step was a reminder that I had taken back control of my own life. For years, I had assumed that marriage meant sharing everything, trust, finances, decision-making, but I learned that sharing is only beautiful when both people protect what is shared. I had protected our home, our money, our future. He had protected only himself. Understanding this brought a strange mix of sadness and relief. I also realized something deeper. When someone betrays you financially, they are not just taking money. They are taking your sense of safety. They shake the ground beneath your feet, make you question your own mind, and leave you doubting your judgment. But uncovering the truth, gathering evidence, and standing up for myself helped bring back the confidence I thought I had lost forever. Each document I secured, each meeting I attended, reminded me that I was capable, alert, and stronger than I had ever been. In the weeks that followed, people began asking questions. Neighbors noticed he wasn't around. Friends asked if everything was okay. I learned to answer calmly, without shame. I'm taking care of myself now, I would say. That was enough. I didn't need to explain the betrayal or the stolen money. The strength in my voice said everything I had discovered, that protecting my dignity mattered more than protecting his image. For years, I had kept the peace by staying silent. Now, I protected peace by refusing to hide the truth. My nights became peaceful again. No more lying awake, wondering why he stayed up late. No more checking receipts or sensing secrets slipping through cracks. I slept, knowing my finances were safe, my home was secure, and my life was mine again. The stress that once lived in my chest slowly cleared, replaced by a quiet pride I had done something many women my age are too afraid to do. I faced betrayal head-on, documented it carefully, stood my ground, and protected what was rightfully mine. But the greatest lesson didn't come from the documents or the lawyers. It came from the moment I looked in the mirror one morning and realized I recognized myself again. Not the anxious version of me who worried about every bill or every whispered phone call. Not the tired woman who lived in a house filled with unspoken tension. I saw the woman I used to be, steady, wise, and strong. A woman who had survived storms before and would survive this one too. I learned that age does not make you weak, betrayal does not make you broken, and reclaiming your life is always possible, no matter how late the hour women my age often give quietly, sacrifice without complaint, and tolerate more than we should. But this experience taught me that protecting your hard work is not selfish. It is necessary. The money I saved represented decades of sacrifice, patience, and discipline. Allowing someone, even a husband, to misuse it would have been erasing my own story. Looking back now, I do not feel hatred. I feel clarity. People show you who they truly are when they think you are not paying attention. He showed me his greed, his entitlement, and his willingness to lie. I showed him my strength, my intelligence, and my refusal to be controlled. That is the real ending of the story. Not the betrayal, but the courage to rise above it. Today, I wake up in a home that feels safe again. I drink my morning coffee without fear of what I might discover. I walk into my kitchen knowing that no one is sitting there with my bank statements, plotting behind my back. My life is quieter, but stronger. And if there is one thing I want every woman listening to my story to know, it is this. You are never too old to protect yourself, never too old to find the truth, never too old to reclaim your freedom, and never too old to start again on your terms.